as we covered before, Allbirds was a shoe company and they were very environmentally conscious. It kind of became the cool, trendy shoe of tech bros in Silicon Valley. So if you worked at one of these big tech companies there in San Francisco, you probably owned a pair of Allbirds. Now, of course, after that, they went public. The business started to fall apart a little bit during the pandemic. And now we'll go ahead and transition. So before we move on, let's talk about the word fall apart. So this kind of means that something ends. Think about a cookie. You kind of crush a cookie and the pieces start to fall apart. So typically this means something is ending or failing, but little by little. So you could say, for example, our business started to fall apart when our top salesman left the company. Now, after this, unfortunately, they couldn't turn things around no matter what they tried. By 2026, they were winding down operations. They were closing their retail stores one by one, and most people and most investors had already written them off as a lost cause. In fact, their stock decreased about 90%, and they recently just sold the shoe part of the company for about $40 million, which sounds like a great deal. But at the peak of their evaluation, their company was worth 4 billion. So literally 100 times what it was worth a moment ago. Let's go over these three phrases: to turn things around, to wind down, and to be written off or to write someone off. So turning things around is to make a change. When things are going badly and you're failing, if you turn things around, you start to make things a success. So Allbirds couldn't turn things around. Now, the next is winding down. This means to kind of start to slow something down a little bit, kind of slowly start the process of closing or stopping something. And the last one, to write something off, has two meanings, but in this case, it means that you kind of accept something as a failure and you kind of don't imagine it or really don't have any hope of it succeeding. So, for example, let's say you're a sports fan and your favorite team has lost the first half of the season. They have lost every single game. Many people will start to write off this team and say, okay, this season, we're not going to make it to the championship. We are going to lose, and let's write off this season and hope that next season will be better. In this case, everybody was writing off Allbirds and saying, okay, this company will probably go out of business. Then, out of nowhere, the company decides to rebrand. Now, this is what happened last week. So, the shoe part of the company, the intellectual property, so the brand itself, the inventory, the stores were all sold for $39 million to another company. And as we said, this is about 1/100th of their current price. And they announced that they're going to pivot, so change to AI. So rebrand, of course, is to change your brand to something better and newer. And pivot is kind of similar. So, for example, if a Starbucks decided that instead of coffee, they wanted to open a nice restaurant for people to go and eat dinner, this would be a pivot. And in this case, it's quite an extreme pivot. So their new plan was to branch out into a completely new industry by buying powerful computer chips called GPUs and renting them to other companies. Basically, they wanted to cash in on the AI boom and become a tech company overnight. And as crazy as it sounds, they kind of did, at least according to the stock market. So over the 1 day period when they changed their strategy and released a report to investors saying, hey, we're switching to AI, their stock exploded. It went up over 600% in 1 day. Some reports say up to 800%. It depends on which data you look at. So let's take a look real quickly, the chart for this company, and I think you have to see it to believe it. So let's go back here to 1 month. All right. So you can see that on April 14th, the price was $2.50. Then the day they released the news, the 15th, the stock went up to $17. So absolutely insane. I don't think even this is like some cryptocurrency or something. No real stock typically increases this much. But of course, in the days after, the stock has dropped quite a bit. So now it is down to $8. So it's less than half of what it was, but it's still quite a bit higher, about 3.5 times higher than it was before announcing this news. So quite a crazy change, especially because they haven't really done anything and their company is still 300% more valuable than it was a couple weeks ago just because of this announcement. So quite a crazy situation in the marketplace. Let's talk about some of these new words. So branch out. A branch is part of a tree. So in a tree, you have the main part, and then the branches are the sticks that go out. And so to branch out is to try something new that you haven't tried before. So they're saying, okay, we're going to branch out, try something new. Next, we have cash in on. This is to take advantage of a new situation in order to make some money. So that's what they're trying to do here. And to buy into something in this context means to believe the hype. For example, let's say your boss has a new idea at work and says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change our marketing strategy, but we need everybody to buy in to the strategy. So everyone needs to believe, everyone needs to trust, and people need to buy in kind of to, yeah, just to believe and support an idea. In this case, of course, some people bought into this, but most people don't and see this as a very weird tactic. Now, I'll explain a little bit about what this business is. Of course, AI is a huge business, it's a huge opportunity, and there's a lot of money to be made in this world. But the reason that many people haven't bought into this and people are skeptical is because there is a big supply problem with manufacturing of these chips and these graphics processing cards that are required in order to run AI. The biggest company who makes and sells these GPUs, these graphics processing units, is NVIDIA. So they used to produce these for people who played video games. And of course, they pivoted to AI when things got popular, and they're the biggest name in the industry. But NVIDIA needs to get the kind of the raw materials and the chips from another company. And in the whole world, there are only a few companies who actually have the ability to manufacture these chips because it's very sophisticated technology. There are lots of trade restrictions and geopolitical issues because of the power of these chips, and there's just a very limited supply. So these big companies like NVIDIA and Google and Amazon, these companies have already placed big orders for all of the available supply in these companies that can create these chips and create these processing units. So I don't think it matters how much money you have. You can't just call TSMC, which is a company, one of the few companies who makes the chips, and say, hey, I have $50 million. Can you please sell me some chips? They'll say, sorry, we're sold out until 2028. Or, yeah, we have what's called a pecking order. This is kind of a bit of a play on words here because this idiom comes from birds. And I guess in the animal kingdom, birds have a bit of a hierarchy, and maybe the mom or the dad bird gets to peck or to eat first. And so we apply this to human interaction. So anytime we say there's a pecking order, it just means that there is a hierarchy. And in the limited supply of the raw materials and finished products like GPUs needed to build data centers and run AI companies, there's already an established hierarchy, an established pecking order. And so a new company like Allbirds is not going to be able to just arrive and set up a new business easily, in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Do you think this is a real strategy? and a good way to pivot and start a new business? Or is this just a desperate company who's trying to cash in on a trend before the whole thing falls apart? We'll go ahead and finish with the story portion here